Hey, Sens fans, welcome to this week's Senstennial Weekly Wrap-up. We got the whole crew this week for the first time, so that's great. We're going to be talking about a few things that happened in the world of the Ottawa Senators this week, starting with the biggest news, which was very recent, and that was Steve Staios being introduced by Michael Andlauer as Ottawa's new president of hockey operations. Yes, they finally did it. The years
They got
long,
one.
insert the "it's been 84 years" meme. It's like finally the Sens have done it, the impossible, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to touch on Shane Pinto's contract, which we talked about in the weekly wrap up, the first one that we did, but unfortunately that is still not wrapped up. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll get to a couple of the preseason games that happened that we haven't covered yet and touch a base on the preview of the Sens Jets matchup. So let's kick it off with Steve Staios. And, I'll throw it to Bennett first. What does an addition like this mean to the Senators front office?
Yeah, I think it's great. As you said, this has been a very long time coming. When I was Googling the role president of hockey operations this morning when the news broke, I was finding articles from like 6 years ago where Melnick was saying that he was trying to hire a president of hockey operations. And I was like, wow, yeah, and I guess that never happened, huh? So we finally made it, like you said. This is going to be, I think it's going to be important for this team moving forward. We've alluded to several times throughout the podcast about how the Sens are an organization that has been light on the front office, light on kind of like the backroom staff that make the wheels tick for a team. If you compare us to our rivals, say Toronto or Montreal, and you scroll through their staff pages, you see they've got more talent, more people in every capacity, be it medical, scouting, front office, player development, coaching. And he alluded, Staios in his introductory press conference alluded to wanting this team to be best in class. I think that's the kind of thing that they're talking about, filling out the holes in our hockey ops department, in our coaching department, our player development, our scouting. I think that we all want to see some new blood, some more blood, just anything that'll help this team gain a competitive edge when it comes to drafting, trading for players, anything like that. So all that is to say that I think it's a really good move. Staios is a great hire. We knew it was coming. I mean, Staios and Lauer have a long history together. He was the GM of the OHL's Hamilton Bulldogs that Ann Lauer was the owner of. And he had a lot of success at the OHL level. They won the OHL title a couple of times, a little fell short of the Memorial Cup. And he was named OHL GM of the Year at one point. So he's coming in with pedigree. He's going to be in a role, and he has a vision of where he and Lauer and Dorion and kind of the leadership of this team want to take things. And I think that we're all on board with that vision.
Yeah, and Matt, I'll flip it over to you and get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a lot of, whispers about, Michael Andlauer. He was the owner of the Hamilton Bulldogs, and he really wants his guy to come on over. And, there was humming and hawing with the league, and, Ken Holland over in Edmonton was like, he's our guy. And, it was sort of all but confirmed that he was going to be joining the Sens, and it's really good to see that he has. And it almost feels like one of those like Steve Yzerman hires of the when he was initially hired by the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was the VP of hockey operations for Detroit for quite some time before, and then Tampa hired him, and the rest is legitimately history. And I feel really good about this hiring because I've only ever heard good things about the guy when it comes to his decision making and who he is as a leader. And he said all the right things in the press conference today. He came off really well. Spoke eloquently, which is hard to do when you're in a leadership position for the Senators, apparently. But Michael Andlauer does it. Now Steve Staios does it, and As you said, he's looking to make this organization kind of best in class wherever you look. And, there's going to be a very good opportunity to do that and fill it out with, let's hope, bolster that pro scouting department where there's almost too many cooks in the kitchen. Bolster that the amateur scouting, give Sean Tierney some opportunity to hire a few more people. I think it's great. I think having somebody who's above Dorion to help him do his job is excellent, especially, it doesn't hurt having smart people in the building. And I feel as though we've lacked that. And, Dorion had said, like, he's been begging for more help. And I saw some people kind of to sort of brill at that and say, well, he fired Pierre Maguire. Honestly, like, who wouldn't?
It's not only that, but Pierre Maguire was a Eugene Melnyk hire. So why would Pierre Dorion keep him?
Exactly. So, and the firing of Trent Mann or what have you. But I think the writing was on the wall there. With all this to say, this is my roundabout way of saying, I think Pierre Dorion will be a better GM with Steve Staios coming on as president of hockey operations, because Steve has a knowledge that, Dorion might not have, or vice versa, and they can complement each other really well. And I see really good things with this duo going forward.
And on that point, he does mention that he's like, I come from a scouting background. Staios comes from a player's background. So he does make that distinction that they have different experiences, but both led them to an NHL front office job. So I thought that was something to take a note of. As you said on Sean Tierney, Staios and Andlauer, I believe it was Staios that brought Sean Tierney up, but he was actually with the Hamilton Bulldogs as well in the front office when they won, I believe, at least one of the championships. He just said he was part of the championship team. And so that kind of makes sense that Andlauer, brought in Sean Tierney as another one of his guys running the analytics for the Sens. That'll help. Pierre Dorion did bring in Ryan Bonus, and I think Ryan Bonus did a good job in his like senior player development role in Pittsburgh. So, you bring in Ryan Bonus as like some fresh blood to the front office. And now Andlauer brings in both Steve Staios and Sean Tierney. I think it's starting to round out that front office nicely. And I mean, you can only really go up from here. And it was good to know that like Staios kept saying best in class. Like they talked about kind of a comparison to the Habs and the amount of staff they have, as you mentioned. And they also talked about collaborating. Like they don't want it to be a strict like Staios is the boss, Dorion is the subordinate. It was like, sure, there's going to be Staios like talking directly to Andlauer about how the hockey operations are going, but they want them to collaborate and it to be like a cohesive environment and not feel like that stringent power of hierarchy type situation. And the one thing Staios also said is that, he's going to take care of like the broad picture stuff, the vision of the hockey ops department, all that sort of thing, while Dorion deals with the day-to-day, and that it'll help Dorion because there'll be less stuff on his plate to do. And Andlauer made it clear, like, he knew Dorion needed some help to take stuff off his plate. So, I mean, all good things. I know some people are like, pencil Staios in as the Dorion replacement. And I mean, it depends on how the season goes. It's totally a possibility, but for now, I would like to be positive about our front office, and just making additions is really nice to see.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think that so much of the conversation in the last few months has been, Dorion is on borrowed time because Andlauer is going to have his guy is going to want in that role, and like we've all said that at one point or another as well, that we're not, we were also sort of assuming that was how things go. But I think by filling the president role and keeping Dorion on as GM, like you say, it allows for a little bit more diversity of views and opinions about how they want things to go, and you can let Dorion be good at the things he is good at, and he does have strengths as a GM, and you can let Staios be good at the things that he's good at. And in fairness, I mean, dichotomies are what we all gravitate to when it comes to things like this, but I guess nobody had on the bingo card the idea that they'd just have the two of the guys working together in this role, And I think and hope that will be successful.
Yeah, 100%.
And to the point, if they decide to part ways with Dorion, which again, I think, there would be some merit to that decision if they did want to go down that route. I don't see Staios at this point as waiting to take over Dorion's job. I think they would replace Dorion with a different guy, and Staios would stay in his new current role, because I think that it'd be kind of odd to bring in someone as like the president of the whole hockey side of things and then kind of like demote them, quote unquote, to GM. If they want to get rid of Dorion, I don't think that's the way that they would have played things.
Yeah, and I hope soon they look to bring in a new head of amateur scouting. From what I understand, they haven't done that yet. And because of Trent Mann's departure, I'm sure that they'll want to fill some holes in their amateur scouting department.
And boy, do we have some holes. And boy, do we need a new head of amateur scouting. The last couple of drafts have been...
After the break, we will talk about Shane Pinto, his contract status, and then we'll also look at some of the preseason games, as I mentioned earlier. So stay tuned for that. Hey, Sens fans, we're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw 5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. So, football's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the app now and sign up with code THPN. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets, only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. That's code THPN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino Resort, licensed partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Welcome back, everyone. Next up, like I said, we're going to be talking about the Shane Pinto contract situation. Now, as I mentioned off the top, we talked about this 2 weeks ago on our weekly wrap-up. The situation has not changed. In the press conference today with Dorion, Staios, and Andlauer, the question was posed to them, what's happening with Shane Pinto? Of course, Dorion, he had that smug son of a bitch grin on him, and he said that they know the fans want Shane Pinto in camp. They want Shane Pinto in camp, and they're hoping to get it done very soon. So we'll wait and see on that. But, Matt Bennett, I'll start off with you, Matt. What do you think of the Shane Pinto situation? And, I mean, who is going to be going out? There's been a lot of talk. Is it Matthew Joseph? Is it going to be Eric Brandstrom? Where do you fall in that kind of line of thinking?
Well, I mean, we did sort of touch on it in our season preview, but I think it kind of has to be Matthew Joseph, especially considering Brandstrom moving him doesn't get you to the number that Pinto probably wants. And it locks you up with a certain amount of forwards, and it's a whole thing. Yeah, this Pinto thing is very frustrating, and I kind of lean back on the idea that you should have paid your guys first. And if Sanderson was the first point of business for you this summer, great, respect it. But Pinto should have been second. Not signing Zach McEwen, not going out and signing 4 or 5 different AHL guys, not going and getting Tarasenko. Pinto is a key part of this team, and he should have been paid either before or right after Jake Sanderson getting paid. So this is another case of sort of unforced errors in bad contracts. When you look back at how many of them we've had to buy out, and dead cap space. And I don't think Matthew Joseph is on a bad contract by any stretch of the imagination, especially considering he had a really bad year last year. And I feel like him regressing back to his norm will be right where he should be in terms of contract value versus what he's producing. But he's the guy. Like, he had a 2-goal game against Montreal, and everybody's like, well, we got to get rid of anybody else. We can't get rid of Matthew Joseph. And I'm like, guys, taking out a key part of your defense is way, way worse than taking out a, fringe third line guy for your forwards. It just, like, the thought process doesn't make a lot of sense to me when we've been on record saying our defense is a position of strength going forward. And if you suddenly remove Brandstrom from that, the depth of which, if one of the guys in the top 4 gets hurt, I don't feel comfortable sort of vaulting any of the fringe guys into that position.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point. A lot of people, they look at Ottawa's top 4 and they're like, oh, well, Brandstrom's going to be in the bottom pairing now, and oh, he won't be able to face tough competition and this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, guys, he doesn't need to be a huge defenseman on your third pairing. Like, you don't need to have lumbering players back there. And I've seen, like, put Clevin and Hamnick together. And listen, we saw Hamnick slide a puck into his own net in preseason action against the Habs, right? Like, we all saw that. I don't really see him as being like a 82 game defenseman for the Ottawa Senators this season. Sure, coming in from time to time. If there's injuries, friggin' knock on wood, hopefully there isn't. But, in the event that there are, Brandstrom actually has the skating and other abilities to move up into the top 4 if need be. And you can't put Hamnick back in a top 4 role if you want to make the playoffs. So, yeah, when it comes to defensive depth, the Sens aren't as fortunate. JBD has had a lackluster preseason, I'd say. Lassie Thompson's actually looked decent. There's Matt Paolo, I may be mispronouncing it, I apologize. But he's looked decent. There's some defensive depth there, but it's like not someone who you can totally trust if need be.
Like, why would you sort of, not to like, make a joke about it, but like, why would you bet the farm that any of those guys are going to like be able to slot in where we've seen Brandstrom do it? It would be really dumb asset management.
Yeah, but all that to say, Bennett, where do you fall in this? Are you still in the camp of, clearing cap space on the blue line or clearing cap space from the forward core?
I think it's easier to find serviceable third or fourth line forwards than it is to find, good bottom pairing defensemen who could, if need be, move up the lineup, like you were saying, Nave. So I agree. I think, like, be it Joseph, be it somebody else, I think I would make the move at forward to clear room for Pinto. And, guys that can, that are serviceable third line players are, not to be totally flippant, but not that hard to find in the NHL. There's a lot of guys that, you can acquire for a third round pick or something that could do that kind of job. So I'm not too worried about that. I agree that I think poor asset management has put us into this position. We were talking before about Dorion and some of the strengths that he has. This is a weakness, I think, that we can say at this point, is he makes a lot of moves that cost us things to undo other moves that he made. I mean, like Matthew Joseph, we acquired in a trade for Nick Paul, and then we signed him to a contract. I agree, it doesn't look terrible. I mean, like, last year it looked bad, that contract. Yeah. I think if Joseph can sort of regress to the mean, be something more akin to what he's been throughout his career, then it's not a bad contract. But right now it looks bad, and teams are gonna, rake Dorion over the coals for it, because they can point to last season and be like, this guy didn't do anything, so give us a sweetener if we're going to take on that deal. But it's like, he traded Nick Paul for a player instead of a pick, and then now we're in a position where that player that he traded for and then signed, he's going to have to trade away and possibly include a sweetener to trade away in order to sign somebody that he could have just signed if none of that had ever happened, right? Like literally, I mean, like it would have been bad asset management to let Nick Paul walk for nothing, but you could have traded him for a pick and then just signed Pinto and sidestepped this whole issue, right? You know, Matthew Joseph would not have made or broken anything that happened in the last 2 years. And it's just like decisions like that. You know, it's like finding the most complicated way of getting from A to B instead of like, you know, if you decide that Pinto is a player that's important to your core and, you know, Nick Paul isn't, then it's like, why try and like add another Nick Paul that you then have to sign and then create problems for yourself down the road. It's just things like that. You know, it's like, why would you sign Zach McEwen and Travis Hamonic, you know, certified scrubs that shouldn't be on your NHL roster or any roster, and then you're like, oh wait, actually the good young player that played second line center for us all of last year hasn't been signed yet. Like why would you leave? Like no one's going to be calling for Hamonic, no one's going to be calling for McEwen. You could sign those guys tomorrow and you wouldn't have been under any pressure. Like teams wouldn't have like snapped them up or anything. Like, but Pinto is a guy that you needed to get signed all summer long, and that's the one you've left to the last minute. It just seems
kind of baffling.
Yeah, just kind of baffling.
It doesn't
make sense. Why would you do things in that order?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys that they could have, you know, either waited to sign depth players until Shane Pinto had been re-signed, or, you know, maybe done a little bit more brainstorming on how the money would work. At the end of the day, like, I at least appreciate the fact that all of Ottawa's key core players have been signed. Shane Pinto, I agree, is definitely like a core player, but right now he's filling a third line role. Obviously, there's a possibility that he has to move up into the second line role again, depending on Norris's long-term health status. But I don't know, at least it's not like we're waiting on like Tkachuk to sign again, or like Stützle don't have the money to fit like, you know, I know Sanderson's on the last year of his entry-level contract this season, but if his big $8 million contract was starting this season, or that's how much money he was commanding in the Sens only had like $3 million in space or something, that to me would be much more concerning versus a third line player who, don't get me wrong, I really like Shane Pinto, but it's not like the success of the Ottawa Senators is riding on him being signed. Right now, they do have organizational depth at forward. I think guy like signing Smakal ended up, I think so far in preseason has looked very solid. He's had 2 really good games. He's going again tonight against Winnipeg in a third line role, which is great. Second line role. So it'd be nice to see how he plays there. You know, Sokolov, I think, has had a pretty good training camp. Yarventi's had a good training camp. So there's like some players who I thought would probably be Belleville players 100% this season and are kind of proving themselves to potentially be NHL depth ready. Anyway, we'll see. All that to say, I do want Shane Pinto signed. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it's not the end of the world. And some people are like writing sign Shane Pinto on like every single Sens post. And I think people just need to kind of calm down a bit and just like let things run their course. I'm sure he will be playing on the Ottawa Senators in the next couple of weeks. But finally, I wanted to touch on the preseason games. The last time we recorded, the Ottawa Senators had played 1 game against the Leafs. They have now played a second preseason game against the Leafs where they won 4-3 in overtime. And then they played a game against the Habs using their like C-list roster and poor Korpisalo. And they lost 4-3 in regulation. And then, of course, tonight they're matched up against the Winnipeg Jets. So I'll toss it over to Bennett. And, you know, what are your thoughts on the last couple preseason games?
Yeah, I think preseason is the time to try things out and give a look at guys that, you know, you don't necessarily expect to be part of your opening night roster. So it does make for weird viewing at times when, you know, the players that you know and expect will be, you know, dominating discourse throughout the year are kind of playing secondary roles to guys that you've never heard of. But that's what preseason's all about. It's just, it's just think of it as part of training camp. These are exhibition games. They don't count. They don't matter for anything other than just getting to see guys and what they can do. So I think that obviously, because it's preseason and because this is the first Sens hockey we've seen and going on 6 months pretty much, people are having reactions to it, but again, like we've been saying, you really can't read in anything into these results. It's just training camp. Don't I haven't been following the scores or anything. Like, it's just like who has been looking decent, who has been looking promising. I saw discourse about Korpisalo. He looked pretty good in the game that he was in, despite the 4 goals or whatever it was. Most of those were not his fault. He was, as you say, playing with guys that he will not be playing with when the Sens season starts for real. So yeah, I think it's good to see some guys that have like Smakal have sort of taken advantage of the opportunity to show what they can do. But at the end of the day, we know who's going to be on the roster at come puck drop in October. So
I think at least in the top 6. I think the bottom 6 has a little bit more openings available, but yeah, no, I definitely agree that you definitely know like who's going to be on the blue line and then who's going to be in the top 6 for the Sens. It's just kind of sorting out the gaps maybe in the bottom 6 of the forward core and like who will go where.
Even there, I'm not sure how many gaps there are. I feel like things that we genuinely don't know, like 4th line right wing, maybe. I mean, like Joseph, like if he's still here, he'll be playing left wing on either like the 3rd or on like the 4th line, probably. Like the 3rd line, assuming we sign Pinto, we kind of have an idea of what that's going to be. It's a lot of auditioning for like 1 or 2 roster spots, that 6th role that Hamonic is kind of penciled in for that somebody else could take, or that that 4th line role that McEwen or somebody else could take. It's hopefully not McEwen, hopefully someone that can play hockey, but
yeah. So Matt, where do you fall on the spectrum of Sens preseason? Have you watched enough, and who do you like?
I think I've watched every game. It's like, I don't know. I've been missing Sens hockey, so I like watching just to see, some of the guys that I really like. Tonight is going to be more of a NHLer heavy for sure. It looks like it'll be basically our opening night defense core. Lassie is probably the only outlier there. And then it's pretty close to our starting night roster for like the top 6, aside from Roby and Yuri Shmakal. But I think one of the sort of elephants in the room is that Josh Norris has not been readied to go for a preseason game. But I think some of the expectation is that he'll be going the next game. So who knows? I think they're taking it a little too cautiously. And he's been on record saying like he's good to go. I'm still like, I get not wanting to rush him in, especially considering it is preseason, but I think you should probably play him in the last 2 games, I guess. And Vladimir Tarasenko gets a shot with Tim Stützle tonight on the left side. And I do also find it kind of weird that he's not playing on his regular right side, especially after DJ was saying that Giroux and Batherson had both been talked to about the possibility of playing on their offside. So there's a lot of different storylines. I like the Angus Cruikshank's game, and he's going to be playing tonight. Hopefully we can see a little more from him. And he's one of those guys that can be, challenging for a 4th line position. And I mean, I would not complain having somebody like him, because every game he's played at the NHL level, whether it's preseason or not, like he's always stood out to me. So I don't know. Love preseason because the vibes are always kind of immaculate. We swept the Leafs, which is always a good thing. And we've had some pretty good goaltending showing so far. Sogard had a great game. Forsberg had a great game. Korpisalo had a so-so game, but the fact is the roster in front of him was doggy doo-doo.
Yeah, and I mean tonight it looks like the roster that Winnipeg sent to Ottawa is kind of doggy doo-doo. So
Yeah.
hopefully Ottawa can put on a good show here for the home fans and take away a nice easy win. And we can see some performances, some more Smakehouse, some more Roby Arventi. Both of them are in the lineup. Matthew Highmore's getting another opportunity. I kind of liked what I saw from the first preseason game with him. And Marilainen gets the start. So looking forward to seeing how he does. And yeah, on that note, thank you everyone for taking the time to watch a longer weekly wrap up today, but there was a lot to discuss. So really appreciate it. Matt's vibes are friggin' high right now.
Yeah,
so
it's a Friday. The vibes are up. Bennett looks great. Matt looks great. Guys, it's always a pleasure with us on the Senstennial talking to you guys. We never get to talk to you, but maybe at some point during the season, we'll have a little fan episode of some kind.
I was about to say,
going to be I'm doing the outro now. I'm doing the outro. We've got some really cool guests coming up. Our subscribership on YouTube is sick. We're doing numbers. Our social media at the Senstennial on Twitter. That's where we're mostly at. Our Instagram game's a little weak, but it's all good. And overall, keep the good times rolling. Go Sens go.
You gave the wrong @, for our Twitter, dude. It's just @Senstennial. Oh my God, dude, fired. Matt will no longer be on the Senstennial podcast.
Please rescind my my membership of the Senstennial.
On that note, have a good night, everyone. Enjoy the long weekend if you get that extra day off. And
actually find a way to celebrate the Day of Truth and Reconciliation, because that's a really important day for Indigenous people and Canadians in general, because they are vastly underrepresented and criticized in Canada. So let's do good here.
Hell yeah. Thanks for that, Matt. So everyone, enjoy the weekend. Go Sens go, and we'll see you next time.